Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the IBS Freedom Podcast. I am joined by my co-host extraordinaire, Amy, Hollenkamp, no comma, RD. I don't know. I wanted to throw in a comma. How are you, Amy?
I'm good. How are you, Nikki?
I'm good. By the way, I'll throw this out in the beginning of the episode this time. So we typically, it's like insider view of our lives. We usually record episodes for you guys on Wednesdays. And now we're going to be doing Q&A videos on Instagram, also on Wednesdays. So keep your eyes peeled. In retrospect, I should probably post about it in like the actual timeline or something ahead of time. But right now we're just kind of being spontaneous. Sometime Wednesday afternoons, we're going to do a hybrid live Q&A where we take some live questions, and we also start covering some of the questions that you guys have left on the YouTube videos and via email. So be sure to keep your eyes peeled for that and follow us. My Instagram handle is triangleguts, guts plural, and you are Amy_Hollenkamp_RD.
Correct.
Yes, so keep your eyes peeled for that. But Amy, would you care to reveal the topic of today's discussion for our viewers?
So last podcast episode, we discussed hyperglycemia. So now we are going to discuss hypoglycemia. And if you aren't watching this on YouTube, Nikki did a fantastic hand motion from high to low.
The highs and the lows, baby. We're covering the hills and the valleys.
Right. So this is, again, like an exciting episode. I know you have a little bit more experience with like low blood sugar probably than I do. I had pretty swinging blood sugar. Personally, like sometimes I'd go a little bit low, but it was never too bad. Usually my problems were higher. So I'm curious, maybe we start with just hearing a little bit about your hypo issues in the past.
Yeah. It's beautiful. Like we are such cosmic littermates in so many different ways. Like, how perfect is it that you have experience with things that I do not, and vice versa, from like our personal healing journeys. But yeah, like I don't precisely know when it started. I think it's one of those things that creeps up on you, and then you're just like, oh, damn.
Right.
And I think also I didn't know what to attribute the symptoms to for a really long time is probably part of the problem. But basically, the height of my gut issues and my IBS, but in retrospect, I think I probably had SIBO. The height of that for me was grad school. And the irony is that I started working on my health in other ways, and I improved my health in other ways. So, like, I went gluten-free and worked on my gut quite a bit, and that resolved my chronic low back pain of 5 years. Great. Cutting out dairy for me made a huge difference in my nasal and like sinuses and allergy symptoms, to a point where I was able to get off of my 3 prescription allergy medications and drastically reduce the incidence of sinus infections that I was getting. So like it was weird because I had improved my health in a number of ways, but for whatever reason, microbially or otherwise, I realized at some point in grad school that I just picked up initially that I had to have snacks. Like I would eat, I would get up and have classes. I would have breakfast at like 8 a.m. or whatever it might be. And I would have to pack like a granola bar or a yogurt or an apple. I would have to pack something that I would eat mid-morning in between classes. And then I would eat lunch around 12 or 12:30. And then I would have another, like some nuts or a granola bar or an apple or whatever it might be. I had another snack that I would do in the middle of the afternoon, like 2, 3 o'clock. And then I would eat dinner at, 6 or whatever time I got home from classes. And then I would oftentimes have like a late night snack, kind of like maybe an hour or so before bed. I would have another snack at like 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, something like that. And I started realizing that when I skipped the snack, I would start to feel really awful. Like if I forgot to bring my granola bar or yogurt or power bar, whatever it was, I would start to get a dull, annoying headache. It felt very much like a tension headache. So like that tight band around the head, like a vice around your head, around your forehead. So I would start to get headaches. And if it got bad enough, I would start to get really woozy and like really lightheaded. Like if I stood up too quickly, I already had the background issue of like a very mild or subclinical version of POTS, I think. Because for a lot of years, I remember if I stood up too quickly, I would feel woozy and I would kind of black out and I wouldn't be able to see for a couple of seconds. And I would just have to kind of stand there until it corrected itself. But when I would skip these snacks, that symptom got much worse. Like, you know, I kind of got to a point where I could control the blood pressure thing if I just made a point to stand up slowly and carefully, that it wouldn't have been an issue. But I got to the point, if my blood sugar was getting low, that even if I stood up really carefully and really slowly, I would still get really woozy and kind of black out. So those were the big things, like kind of weak or fatigued or like woozy or blacky outy, the technical term, obviously, and headaches. Those were always my symptoms of it. And I think that I probably had some degree of that for a little while before I put it 2 and 2 together and figured out what it was. But to his credit, I think I might have mentioned this in our last episode too. You know, a lot of my functional medicine kind of education, at least in the beginning, was with Datis Karazian. And I would go and I would hear that guy speak like, you know, 3-4 weekends out of every semester. I was hearing Datis lecture about something, which was great. And I remember, to his credit, he always hammered the snot out of us and said 2 things you absolutely always have to look for because they are deal breakers: blood sugar and anemia. If a person is not getting adequate blood sugar to their tissues, all hats are off. Right. Every cell in your body is going to be pissed off from that. And if you can't get adequate oxygen delivery to your tissues because you're anemic, all hats are off. Things are going to get weird. And I remember in his classes, he would talk about blood sugar from both perspectives, the hyperglycemia and the hypoglycemia symptoms. And I think it was at one of his seminars that I finally put 2 and 2 together and realized, oh, that's what's going on there. And for a while, I just, you know, and at the time, this is what he was advocating. At the time, I just knew, okay, I just need to be really careful to not let my blood sugar drop. I just need to be really diligent about having those snacks and eating every 3 hours. And that way I'm managing the problem. And in retrospect, I think the irony with this one is that snacking frequently and eating all the time, like I was, tends to make IBS worse. And it tends to make SIBO worse because then it disrupts your motility and you never get those nice migrating motor complex waves to clear out the small bowel. So if I didn't have SIBO to begin with, I probably induced it to some degree because I was eating religiously every 3 hours like clockwork. So in retrospect, I maybe even had like a subclinical case of SIBO, even if that wasn't something I would have met diagnostic criteria for. I don't know because I never did the test. But it's difficult to get people out of this sometimes because it's like you need to manage the blood sugar, quote unquote. You need to stabilize the blood sugar in order to prevent these hypoglycemic swings, in order to prevent that inflammatory process from going forward. But also you need to have longer stretches of fasting in order to promote motility and treat SIBO. So it can be kind of this really tangled web, how you get people out of that spot. But yeah, that was my experience with it. After a while, and again, I don't really know kind of which came first, the chicken or the egg, and I don't know what the timing was, but organically over the course of several years of working on healing my gut and figuring out what was going on, I did notice that once I resolved my IBS and my gut had normalized, I did notice that I was able to drop out those snacks and eat, 3 square meals a day with no problem after that.
Right.
I can't tell you, like, people always want to know, like, what was the supplement that did it? Or like, was it treating the candida that did it? Was it treating the leaky gut that did it? I don't know. Because I was layering in so many different things all at the same time. I really don't know which thing managed the blood sugar the most specifically. But I can tell you that over the course of healing my gut, period, by the time I had healed my gut, I noticed organically that I was able to skip the snacks. So.
Right. Well, it's interesting too. I think you're right. There's an interesting dilemma when it comes to blood sugar, like low blood sugar, because it's something that I see a lot in my clients that, and this isn't always the case, but I see it a lot in my clients that are under calories total.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Sometimes when we'll do continuous glucose monitors, it's especially bad through the night. Yeah. But there can be dips during the day too. And it's always, I think it is a hard dilemma for certain people if they're struggling to get enough calories in at their meals. And then it's like, okay, do we try to continue having the snacks? Like what you were saying with the motility piece and the blood sugar, it's like how I sort of approach that is typically I am prioritizing nutrition to start. So like, okay, let's make sure you're getting enough nutrition and then we can work on the patterns. But I think, again, it's a very tricky dilemma to operate through. And I think it's important to have a provider that can help you prioritize different things through the process. You know, I think starting out, blood sugar and nutrition is such a big piece. And you could potentially do some motility. You could work on meal patterns and motility a little bit later on. And then again, like, I think that there's some people too that if they wait too long to do a little bit of fasting, it leads to more inflammation. Like if they're just eating a meal pattern because that's how they always ate, and you know, they always ate six times a day, and they are getting enough nutrition, like how can we start weaning down? You know, maybe they don't have as much outright hypoglycemia. How can we start weaning them down to less meals during the day? So I know what you're saying. It can be a little bit of a tricky dynamic when you're trying to operate with, okay, we have a blood sugar problem, a hypoglycemia problem, and motility issues. Like, how are we prioritizing those things? Can be a little bit of a tricky scenario.
And you touched on something too that I want to bring up. I think in truth, my pattern of snacking came up for two reasons. Because I think what actually happened was, I think I started the snacking first without needing to do it. Not for this reason, at least. And then it was like, at some point, I just noticed that I was dependent on that. But for me, we're taught in school, and honestly, I was taught this in my nutrition classes in undergrad. They were reiterated in grad school to a degree. And even functional medicine folks like Datis Karazian was promoting this in, you know, the early, like, 2010, 2011, 2012, that kind of range. So we hear this a lot. Now it's starting to fall out of favor, thank God. But we get taught, at least back in the day, we were taught nutrition that you want to eat 6 small meals a day to stoke your metabolism or stabilize your blood sugar. And, you know, it sounded good at the time, right? Like when they started kind of building that up, I think that started to be popularized more in the 90s, because I think I remember my mom doing that too.
Right.
It sounded logical, like, yes, that will stabilize our blood sugar. That seems like a good thing to do. But you don't realize that you want the ebbs and flows so that you can give your gut a break, and you want to give your body a break from insulin coursing through your veins in order to lose weight. I started the snacking in part because it had been reiterated over and over in nutrition classes and kind of conventional nutrition dogma that we have to eat this way. And also, I was a rower in college, and I don't even know, like, I think we burned 8 million calories per practice. It was so hard. And, you know, we would go to the dining hall and stuff our faces. But then I just think it was like I needed the extra calories. To your point, sometimes you do need the extra nutrition. Right. If you're working out really, really hard, you know, I think it's like, at the time, I was expending so many calories and I was working out so intensely. And I was like, I had a morning practice that was like 2.5 hours long and very intense. And then we would have a second workout. So we would go to the gym and I would run a couple miles on the treadmill, or I would go do a weightlifting session, or I would go do like a spin class or something as the extra workout in the day later on in the day. And it's just, there were so many calories flying out of my body. I feel like I did need that extra nutrition. So I think I started packing snacks in undergrad, in part because that was very like societally accepted.
Right.
And kind of built up as the correct thing to do. And also I was just burning so many calories at the time.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because I feel like if you're eating 6 small snacks or 6 smaller, if you're eating 6 times a day, you're usually eating less. And I feel like sometimes
I was eating a lot 6 times a day, to be
okay.
clear. When I was a rower, I was eating a lot 6 times a day.
Okay, just to be clear. But I think that there are people, not you, back in the day. Yeah. But I think there are a lot of people that, you know, they're eating either pretty small meals plus snacks, so they're never really fully satisfied after their meals either. Like, there's almost a level of like, okay, well, I'm hungry 2 hours later, I have to eat. And so I'll talk to people and it's like, well, I can't, like, I'm so hungry, like, I have to keep eating. I'm like, well, your breakfast is not sufficient, or your lunch is not sufficient for your needs. Like, we need to make sure that your meals are balanced properly and that you're eating enough at your meals so that you don't have to continue with some of the snacking type meal patterns. I think that that's a big problem too. There's a level of satiety that's hard to reach when you eat smaller meals with snacks versus if you just ate more at your meal times, you'll typically feel more satiated. And that can be a little bit of a process. If you're used to eating small meals, it could feel like you're eating a lot. But I think the satiety factor can oftentimes be helped if you have good balanced nutrition at each meal versus kind of like convenient snacking throughout the day.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'll throw out this too. I don't know if you've witnessed this. Typically, I don't get a significant like level of satiety. I don't feel satisfied from a meal if it's mostly liquid. Even if it theoretically has like a lot of stuff in it. Like, even on the days, I don't really do this a lot in this day and age, but I remember even I would make like a whole Vitamix. The whole thing, and it would be loaded with like all of these different fruits and veggies. I'd put avocado in it. I'd put like, you know, collagen peptides or protein powder or something in it. And even when I make a point to put in 20 grams of protein and some sort of fat source, and it's a very large volume of a smoothie, or I've seen the same thing with protein shakes, even if I feel like the calorie count and the protein and the fat should satiate me, I swear to God, I'll do one of these big shakes or something, and then like an hour later, my stomach is growling again.
Right.
I don't know. That doesn't happen as much with soup, but we tend to make like chunkier soups and stews where there's something that you can kind of chew in the process of that. But yeah, I've noticed that the type of food you eat might also affect satiety and then promote more snacking. So if your breakfast is a big old smoothie or a big old protein shake, that might be part of the problem too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even if on paper the calories and the macros look like they should be decent.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I will say too, again, I think a lot of people, their blood sugars start to dip in the evening, like when they're sleeping, evening through early morning. And I think that eating more carbs at dinner can be really helpful for people that have hypoglycemia through the night, because it fills up their glycogen stores and it helps maintain blood sugar levels through the evening. I know I've had a few clients that have done continuous glucose monitors, and we've seen decently low sugars at night, and it usually disrupts their sleep. And the more kind of carbs, not saying you have to go crazy, but having, an extra...
Just cookies. Amy is officially telling you to eat only cookies for dinner, nothing else.
I rebuke that. No. But I think, again, you could have like, make sure you're having, like, maybe something starchy or, you know, having a little bit of extra fruit on the side for dessert or something like that, just to make sure you're getting a little bit more carbs in the evenings. That's something I usually recommend a decent amount for people that have disrupted sleep. More recently, again, with some of the continuous glucose monitoring stuff I've done with clients, you can see it very clearly happening. But I think a lot of my clients have some blood sugar stuff going on through the night. And I think we talked about that in the hyperglycemia episode too. But just as another kind of meal tip that you could utilize if you have disrupted sleep and sort of more hypoglycemia type issues is making sure you're getting some carbs in the evening, balanced correctly with other macros, but having a little bit more in the evenings could be helpful.
And I think I shared this in the last episode as well, but I'll reiterate just in case. A really good friend of mine is going through a health crisis right now. She's been literally bedridden for a couple of months, and she's really struggling. And one of the things that this started out with was panic attacks. Full blown, like, go to the ER, they tell you you're crazy, panic attacks.
Wow.
And it's been really stressful for her. But I remember she listened to a podcast, not ours, a different one. And there was a naturopath who was talking about how panic attacks are very often tied to blood sugar. So, you know, she, at the time, she was doing finger sticks on herself. And I was like, girl, no, like, just don't even, because she was sticking herself multiple times a day. And I was like, just stop. I said, go to your provider, get a prescription for a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, the Freestyle Libre. And she did, she got it. And she was able to see that it wasn't necessarily the value of her blood sugar. Like, all of the numbers look like they should be good. For her, she was getting panic attacks when the speed of the drop was too quick. So it wasn't like, you know, she would peak at like 120 or 130 or something. And then she would bottom out at like 80 or some very normal number. But if she goes from 120 down to 80 in a matter of an hour, she's good. If she plummets real hard in like 10 minutes, that's where she gets the panic attack. But it's very fascinating because it might not always be related to the numbers, more so like the speed of the fluctuations. Yeah. So that's something to keep in mind. But what was interesting with her is that, to piggyback off your comment, she actually noticed, this is a friend who has done keto and variations of keto on and off for a couple of years, but she noticed that that issue happened way less. Like, the speed of her blood sugar dropping normalized very much when she added more complex carbs, which is counterintuitive to the whole like keto argument. And she'd done keto on and off, but she realized that if she made a point to have some brown rice or some sweet potatoes or a piece of you know, whole grain bread or something with complex carbohydrates, that issue was not as big of a deal for her. It didn't happen nearly as frequently and nearly as severely.
So interesting.
So.
Well, and I think too, we can talk a little bit about, do you want to talk a little bit about the symptoms that are pretty common with hypoglycemia? Do you think that's a valuable?
Well, I think I covered some of them with my story. So like I said, for me, my first symptom, and I still, if I get any sort of hypoglycemic stuff to this day, my tell is always a headache first. For me personally, it's a dull kind of vice around the forehead kind of headache. Very much feels like a tension headache. And then like the kind of lightheaded wooziness. I think a lot of people think more about like the hangry kind of symptom, you know, those stupid freaking Snickers commercials that I want to do bad things to the person who came up with this concept for Snickers. Because let me tell you, if you're hypoglycemic and you're feeling not like yourself and you're getting crabby and hangry, the last thing you want to do is eat a goddamn candy bar. Like, ugh. But it's brilliant marketing on their part because every single one of us can think of these damn Snickers bar commercials that I'm talking about right now. Like, you don't seem like yourself. Here, have a Snickers. Yeah. At least it has peanuts in it. I don't know. Maybe that's something. But those would be the biggest symptoms that I could think of. And then again, anxiety and perhaps panic attacks
Right.
might be related to this as well. But can you think of any other symptoms that I left out?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, like, it could be pretty individual. I think sometimes fatigue, just kind of like not necessarily feeling maybe a little weak, which is sort of maybe along the woozy side of the equation. I think some people get a little bit of irritable, which maybe like coincides with some of the mood changes with like anxiety and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, the hangry.
Right, the hangry type feeling. But yeah, I mean, I think you covered the base as well. I think that those are the predominant symptoms.
And I just thought of something to share too. I don't know if I told you this story. Did I tell you the time? Well, I'll just tell it anyway because I don't want to keep our listeners. Right. I'll just, like, for sake of conversation, I'll start off by saying, did I ever tell you about the time? So I volunteer myself to be a guinea pig on the regular for my patients and for my YouTube channel. And I think that sometimes those make the best videos that I've done. So, like, I told you about how I did coffee enemas for a week or two and got the Aura Ring specifically for that project because I wanted to have a really well-informed series of videos on coffee enemas. Well, similarly, basically right at the beginning of the pandemic, I think, or it was right before, I decided I wanted to do a video doing a SIBO breath test for the channel on YouTube. So I sat down and I mixed the sugar solution, I drank it, and then I breathed through the tubes. In retrospect, I probably could have trimmed the video down. I think it was a little bit unnecessarily long, but oh well. But so I did this video, and because I'm a DC, I'm not a prescriber, I decided, I was like, well, I'm just going to do the glucose SIBO test instead of the lactulose, because then I don't have to jump through the hoops to get the lactulose prescription.
Right.
Bad idea. For me, at least. Man. But I learned a really valuable lesson. So I drank the, I don't know, what would you say, 1.5 pounds of glucose that they give you for the damn SIBO test when you do it with glucose. Collected the breath tubes for however long. And it was right at the end. Right at, the I think 3-hour mark or whatever it was. Right at the very end, like 2 minutes before I collected my last sample, it hit me like a ton of bricks and I felt atrocious. Like lightheaded, woozy, like it actually, I kind of felt like maybe I would faint, and it was a little unnerving because I was here in my office. When you have children that are young, like Jess would have been like 4 at the time. Like when you have young children at home, it's impossible to do something like a SIBO breath test. Like you might as well just go do it in your damn car. So for me, I have an office and I have a camera here. So I was like, I'll just film myself at the office. And that way I don't have a 4-year-old clawing at me to do something when I'm trying to get a video done. But I was here at the office alone by myself at, I don't even know what time in the morning it was. And I actually got really worried because I thought, oh my God, like, if I pass out, nobody's going to find me. And I'm a hermit. So when I'm here by myself, I lock the door. So even theoretically, if the people next door at Domino's heard the bang of my head cracking on the floor, they wouldn't be able to come rescue me anyway because the door's locked. They'd have to like call the landlord of the building if they were really concerned, but they probably wouldn't be that concerned. So I was just like, oh, this is a bad situation. Luckily, thankfully, my kind of quirk about me is that I have food within arm's reach. Literally, I'm touching the cabinet right now. And that's where, again, like I always joke, I bust out my big chocolate bar. Side note, this one was a gift, so it has a bow on it. But, I have like bars and nuts and inulin. I have all sorts of goodies up in my cupboard. And that's like my treat stash that I hide from my husband and my kid. But thankfully, I had, I don't even know, like some trail mix or cashews or something. And basically I collected that last tube of air and I immediately started eating. But I felt so bad, honestly, even after I ate, I felt bad for long enough. I had to cancel all of my appointments for that day.
Oh my gosh.
And I remember I was like, maybe I'll recover for like the last couple of appointments of the day. I keep an inflatable air mattress at my office just in case there's a nap emergency. And I busted out the air mattress and just like passed out on the air mattress for an hour,
Oh my gosh.
thinking I'll feel better when I wake up. I still didn't feel that great. And it was a whole nothing burger of a day. I felt like hot garbage. But it was because you have to ingest like 8 pounds of glucose for that damn test. So it probably, if I only had a CGM then, it probably skyrocketed my glucose like crazy and then dropped me like a sack of potatoes.
Right.
And I would so kill to go back in time and take my blood sugar, like, you know, an hour after and then like at the hypoglycemic crash. I would love to know what the high and low point was for that because it wrecked me. And fun fact, after the fact, like the next day or 2 days later, vaginal yeast infection.
Oh my gosh.
Full on.
You just couldn't catch a break.
No, but you know what? It was miserable, but I was glad that I did it because it taught me a couple things. If somebody has hypoglycemic issues, don't give them a glucose SIBO test. I mean, obviously a glucose SIBO test is contraindicated if somebody is pre-diabetic or diabetic and has hyperglycemia issues. Like, that's a no-brainer. But it taught me, for the hypoglycemic people, do not give them glucose. Go through the extra hoops to get lactulose. But also, if somebody has a history of chronic vaginal candida or the other candida, don't give them the glucose test because you're going to piss it off. And I actually have had numerous female patients now where that comes up where they're like, yeah, I get vaginal candida infections at the drop of a hat. Or like I've worked with some women who have chronic vaginal candidiasis and that's the primary reason why they're working with me. And now I know to warn those women. And I'm like, okay, if we're going to do a SIBO test, we are absolutely not doing glucose because I guarantee your candida will love this.
Right.
And you will hate it.
Well, and it's so interesting. I think that's such a great point. It's funny because, you know, Armand and I are trying to get pregnant in the near future. Mm-hmm. And I think that what I'm reading in some of the books, you know, there's the glucose tolerance testing too, like in pregnancy, where it's like, okay, you drink 75 grams of glucose,
which is a lot.
And I'm already prepping to just tell my doctor I want to do a CGM. I'd pay for it out of pocket because, you know, I don't know, like you'd think that there'd be a better way to do this. And again, I think CGMs would be perfect. Yeah. But you're basically not replicating anyone's diet because like, I mean, I'm sure there's some people. This? Right. I'm sure there's some people that do drink like lots of soda or something back to back. But like to drink 75 grams in such a short period of time and then test the glucose, you know, I'm trying to avoid that. Any pains that would come from that.
Well, I will share for what it's worth. I mean, I think the CGM would be the better option, honestly. And it would give you so much more useful information. Right? Like, that's so much more actionable. But if they insist that you need to do a test, fun fact, I looked this up when I was pregnant with Jess, and apparently you can do a test with grape juice. And you can just, you know, I forget what the amount is, but they basically normalize the amount of glucose in it. Because also, like, the sugar that they give you, they don't just give you table sugar. It's like a prepackaged Capri Sun looking thing. And if you look at the other ingredients in it, it's like I don't even know. It had other stuff in it. I don't remember if it was like food dye or like food coloring or additives or something weird. But I remember looking at the ingredients. Like I Googled the ingredients for the glucose that they use for that test. And I remember thinking, no, because there's other weird stuff in it. But I went to my midwives and I said, yo, look, I'm not drinking that garbage, but I'll do the grape juice. And I got to have, it was so wonderful, actually. They bought, apparently nobody else had asked for this. I don't know. Like, and I went to a midwifery center, so you would think that all of the crunchy dungy, like Chapel Hillian people who go to this midwifery center would be doing the crunchy thing, but I guess I was the only one. But they specifically bought a bottle of Welch's grape juice just for me. They had refrigerated it for me prior to getting there that morning. So I just got to enjoy a nice cold glass of grape juice. And I don't know the last time I had a big old glass of grape juice. It was delightful.
Excellent. You get some polyphenols in there too.
Exactly. It was lovely. It was enjoyable. And I remember like kind of bragging to my husband because he was there with me. And I was like, this is delicious. Too bad I can't share.
All right.
And I'm drinking my grape juice. So that's an alternative too. But you still get an absolute crap load of sugar doing that. But that was my happy medium. I was like, all right, I'll do it. But I'm not drinking the garbage you want to give me.
Right.
Like we don't need some proprietary prescription grade thing for this. Just give me grape juice.
Yeah, I agree.
They agree.
I agree. But yeah, I think again, like it's always I think again the CGM to me would probably be what I would go with if they demanded it or something. Which who knows? I never know with some of the docs.
You would also pull the dietitian card. You could be like, bitch, please. I'm a dietitian.
Right.
I'm not going to let myself get like gestational diabetes and not know it. Right.
Well, and I can kind of read a CGM. So I think you're right. It would give me a lot more valuable information, I think, to do a CGM than to do, something totally foreign from my diet. I don't even know when the last time I had 75 grams of sugar would be, let alone by itself in like, a 15-minute chunk of time.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's so unrealistic.
Yeah, it's so weird. It's an interesting kind of challenge. And I think, again, there could be individuals that might be eating that level of sugar, but again, it's a little bit foreign.
Hold on. Let's just have a fun moment here. I'm going to do a quick Google. Hold on.
Uh-oh.
It's worse than I thought.
What?
Okay. All right. This can't even be right. Okay. I did a Google search.
Mm-hmm.
Sugar in Mountain Dew. Because in my brain, like, Mountain Dew is the worst of the worst. And it's neon green. There's no way Mountain Dew does not give you cancer. I'm sorry. Like, it is a color that is not of planet Earth. I Googled sugar in Mountain Dew. Would you care to wager a bet for a 12-ounce can? Is that what a can is? How big is a can?
It's 12 ounce. 12 ounces? You're right. Okay. I want to guess it's around 35 grams.
Oh, sweet summer child. 46.
Oh my gosh.
46 grams of sugar in one can of Mountain Dew. So really, if you look at it that way, maybe the glucose tolerance test is not that outrageous because you could exceed that amount by just drinking 2 cans of Mountain Dew. Ugh.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to vomit just thinking about it.
Right. Well,
I have my vices. All right, let's compare that. All right. My beloved Trader Joe's Pound Plus chocolate bar. Okay, I don't know what this means. For 31 grams, whatever that means, I think it's like 2 of the squares. I don't even know. It's a total of 8 grams of sugar. Okay, that's reasonable. 46 grams, though.
Well, and I think the thing, too, like, there's some fat in that as well. Like, there's some balance.
And polyphenols.
Right. There's some balance there. I think, again, like, some of the sodas and things like that. I mean, if you're just sipping on soda and there's not much balance, it can just do really wonky stuff to your blood sugar.
I'm gonna vomit thinking about the Mountain Dew now, but I feel like I have to move on from that mentally and distract myself before I get queasy. And again, like the neon coloring is a dead giveaway that it's just not good for you.
Right.
Apparently though, fun fact about America, our beautiful homeland. You ready for this? That neon green food coloring crap that they put in Mountain Dew to make it look like cancer is not legal in Europe. So apparently, if you buy Mountain Dew in Europe, I don't know all of Europe if it's just England. If you buy Mountain Dew in England, it is clear.
Whoa.
Yep. Because Europe knows better than to put actual garbage in their food. More so than we do.
Right.
Yeah, I learned that. I forget if it was, I think I've told you about my British boyfriend, right?
Yes.
For those of you who are YouTube aficionados, Chris Broad from abroad in Japan. I call him my British boyfriend. He's wonderful. He's fantastic. I love him. He's sarcastic and wonderful. It was either one of his videos or it was a like collaboration he did with the anime man Joey or something. But anyway, I think it was one of those kind of videos that they mentioned, but the person talking about it was either British or Australian. And they were like, yeah, when I went to America, I wanted to get a Mountain Dew because I wanted to see the color green and I wanted to drink a real Mountain Dew because back home they're clear. And I was like, huh, okay, but you're voluntarily consuming something that's actual garbage. You just acknowledged it's garbage.
Right.
But when they came to America, they wanted to get a real Mountain Dew. And I was like, oh, no.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, moving on from Mountain Dew. What else could we talk about? I'm gonna tell you something that you might not know because I think this is relatively hot off the press. There might be a link with blood sugar regulation and bile acid malabsorption.
Whoa, really interesting.
Were you aware? Yeah. So I don't remember how I came across this. I think I was doing a YouTube video about bile acid malabsorption, if I remember right. I was either doing it for a YouTube video or a patient a couple months ago. And I was in the deep belly of PubMed and doing like this. What I'll usually do if I'm researching something, like when I'm developing a new course or if I'm researching something for YouTube or for a patient, I do a PubMed search. And then I open up approximately 8 million tabs on my computer. And then I just go through and I skim the title and the abstract. And I just get a gauge of like, do I want to maybe look at this? Maybe.
Right.
And then I'll open up like a Word doc and I'll have a Word document with different categories of it. So like, for that project, I think I did like bile acid malabsorption and the microbiome and, gallbladder function and inflammatory cytokines and immune function and hormones and fiber and whatever else. And I make all these categories and then I basically arrange all of them and I save the links in whatever category it fits into. And then I'll go through and I'll actually like research each topic individually. But I came across some research where they actually used a GLP-1 agonist in bile acid malabsorption, and it worked. And GLP-1 is glucagon-like peptide 1. It's involved in blood sugar regulation, and those drugs, the GLP-1 agonists, are now being promoted as either a drug for diabetes or possibly a weight loss drug. I think a lot of them are injections, if I remember correctly. But it's very interesting that there might be a link with bile acid malabsorption. So I keep forgetting, like I asked people in that video, I was like, do you want me to do a video on GLP-1? Because I could nerd out on it. Or like if it's too in the weeds, like just tell me, no, don't bother. And a bunch of people did comment that they want me to do a video on that. So I have to put it on my schedule eventually, but very deeply fascinating. So I'm working with a patient with bile acid malabsorption right now. And we've talked about blood sugar, and she is somebody who tends to skip meals and tends to not eat a lot. So we're working on kind of addressing that root cause because we're trying to work on this bile acid malabsorption issue.
Right.
In addition to, the microbial component, the inflammatory component, the cortisol component of that. But I thought that was pretty interesting.
It is. That is really cool. I know I've done like some preliminary searches too, more in conjunction with like reactive hypoglycemia. So like people that are eating more regularly, like it has less to do, the hypoglycemia has a little bit less to do with, skipping meals and their blood sugar just naturally dipping a little bit low.
Yeah.
But like they eat a meal and relatively quickly after eating the meal, their blood sugar drops. Sometimes that's being linked similarly to like dumping after a gastric surgery. There's something called dumping. It has to do with like, the concentration of sugars and how things are moving through the stomach. But I have done a little bit of research. It's been a little while where there is a link between like accelerated gastric emptying and potentially reactive hypoglycemia. So when it's connected to meals, which is interesting. Again, I haven't deep dived into it extensively, but, there could be for some people, the speed of gastric emptying could be at play too, if they're having hypoglycemia at meal times. Is that something
Yeah.
you've ever seen before?
Yeah, it's interesting. Right now I'm working with a patient who, it's interesting. She was convinced that she had hyperglycemia when we
Yeah.
first started working together. Convinced.
Yeah.
And, I think her dad has diabetes, and she knew that eating a lot of sugar provoked symptoms for her. So
Yeah.
she had thought, oh, I must be pre-diabetic. And she's a petite little thing, and like nothing in her health history made sense for that. But there were some red flags for hypoglycemia. So she actually got a CGM, and she was able to confirm, oh yeah, no, I have hypoglycemia
Right.
instead. And she'll dip down like into the 50s or 60s sometimes. But we've been plucking away at that, and obviously like making sure she's having balanced meals, and she's having some fat and some protein and some fiber, and trying to work on her gut and her autoimmunity. But one of the things I know that she said that helped her with kind of preventing those bad dips was a colostrum supplement, interestingly. And that she would never have known that if it wasn't for the CGM. But because she was monitoring her blood sugar pretty closely, she was able to see that when she introduced the colostrum supplement, her blood sugar stabilized and she no longer had those dips. So that's been really helpful. Other things have helped to some degree too. But it's interesting also because we've tried to start her on some other supplements, and sometimes it made the problem worse. So for example, not fully thinking of the physiology. Like I kind of had a brain fart on this. But this particular patient has some histamine and allergy type symptoms that we wanted to get under control. So I recommended quercetin. It's great. It's a mast cell stabilizer, antihistamine. It's wonderful. But I forgot quercetin promotes the activity or the production of GLP-1, which is part of the problem with the hypoglycemic crowd, is that those people probably make too much GLP-1.
Right.
They have too vigorous of a first phase insulin response. And that's so it's like they get blood sugar, and then they make a shit ton of insulin and a shit ton of GLP-1, and then those two things send them crashing. So it's it's the exact opposite of insulin resistance. It's like you're almost too sensitive to your insulin in a way with this. But I forgot about the GLP-1 thing with quercetin. And she observed before I even had a chance to process at our next appointment, she said, yeah, I tried to add in the quercetin, but my blood sugar kept bottoming out on me really bad. And I was like, oh, that's right. Damn it. I forgot about that connection. Sorry about that. So we had to discontinue quercetin and do other things to help with the antihistamine front. It was very fascinating though.
Yeah. It's really fascinating. And I also think it's good that it's so interesting because it's like, oh, like, would have you figured that out if you weren't monitoring it? Like, sometimes I think like stuff like that,
maybe
if depending on if she had symptoms that sort of are a big indicator, she might have been able to pick up on that. But yeah, it's pretty fascinating, and I think you've hit on the core stuff. Like when it comes to helping with hypoglycemia, you almost always want to start with, I think nutrition, potentially like, and meal patterns and things like that, making sure things are balanced properly. I think as you're trying to reel in hypoglycemia, to me, again, depending on what kind of meal pattern you're coming from, like if you had someone with hypoglycemia, would you tell them to snack if they're experiencing the dips? Like, I think sometimes people get very locked into the, fasting between meals.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh God, no, I can't eat this snack. But I'm like, if your blood sugar if you're having a bad reaction, then I definitely would snack.
And that's the thing about, I feel like, this day and age and the internet and everything is that is like, you hear at a summit or you hear at a podcast or a YouTube video or whatever it is, and you hear that the MMC only works if you have a fasted window of at least 3 hours between your meals. And you think, oh God, I am doomed to have SIBO if I ever snack again.
Right.
And it's like, not necessarily. I think that there's probably plenty of people who snack who don't have SIBO.
Right.
But it's like, when we're getting to, I would say that's more of a fine-tuning measure.
Yep, right.
A lot of the time. For me, again, like I healed my gut first.
Right.
And then I noticed that the blood sugar corrected itself after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I'm living proof that you can heal the gut first, and then the blood sugar will regulate itself, and then you can take away the snacks later on. It's like, I think you don't want to get to like dead set that you absolutely cannot snack. But I think if it's in your power to not snack, if it's not going to make you feel like garbage and create an inflammatory event for you, then it would probably be the ideal meal pattern to not snack.
Right.
But, I'll either tell my patients, hey, don't sweat it right now. We have bigger fish to fry. Keep the snacks in for right now, but just FYI, we're going to think about dropping that in the future at some point. Or I might gradually have them start to shift, where it's like, if you think like 6 small meals a day, if they're doing, 2,000 calorie diet, what would that equate to? Like 300 or 400 calories per sitting, give or take, somewhere in that ballpark.
Yeah. So
if you think like, maybe you start out having a 300 calorie breakfast and a 300 calorie midday or mid-morning snack. Maybe you just start by like adding another egg to your omelet, or adding a piece of toast, or adding a half an avocado, or whatever it is. Maybe you just start with a shift where it's like, instead of 300, maybe you start with 400, 200, and then 500, 100. And then eventually you get to the goal of, 600 at 0, and you skip the snack altogether.
Right. So you're basically titrating up the meal calories and titrating down the snack calories over time, which, I mean, everything you're saying is pretty consistent with what I do. I think sometimes what I'll have clients do as well is, let's say they're like working on like reducing snacks or things like that, or they're working on bulking up their meals. Like if someone has those feelings of like hangry or like their blood sugar symptoms, if they're experiencing those, usually I'll be like, okay, if you're experiencing those and you need to eat something, like definitely eat something. But I also think it can be really helpful to like look back at your day and run through a couple variables. Like in your past meals, were they balanced properly? Like, did you eat enough at lunch or eat enough at breakfast? Did you exercise more or move more than anticipated? And that could be affecting blood glucose. So I think sometimes it's helpful when you're trying to get the low blood sugar under control to notice when you're having more episodes and trying to pinpoint what factors can be at play there so that you can mitigate for those in the future. So, let's say you're looking back and you're like, oh, I did have a harder workout. Maybe I need to eat a little bit more at breakfast or lunch post-workout than I have been eating, and see how that affects the blood sugar in the afternoon. Like if that's the typical time of the dip that you get, like if there's a pretty standard pattern, sometimes kind of looking retrospectively back at where you've been and what you've been doing the last day or so. You could even look at sleep patterns and stress, and those sort of things could impact things as well. But like, what seems to be the main trigger, and how potentially could you mitigate it moving forward to try to avoid it? I mean, it's one of those things where it's like with many things in the gut health journey, there's tweaking and learning that happens along the way. It's a very similar thing with hypoglycemia. It's almost learning what the triggers are, just like you would learn what kind of triggers your bloating. So I do have some of my clients do that who are having some blood sugar issues. Like try to curiously, it's not like beating yourself up. That's never the right mentality, but curiously looking at your day retrospectively and seeing maybe what could have been at play, it can be a helpful exercise.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point. Let's see, I think there was something else I was going to share, but I'm having a slight break. Oh, I know what it was. I have actually a supplement that I've started playing with in the last few years. It does seem like it helps hypoglycemia, and I think it'll be surprising, at least to our listeners, certainly.
Okay, do share.
So you know how there are digestive enzymes that are supposed to help you break down gluten, right? With DPP4 is the ingredient. So there's a million of them out there, but there's like Wheat Rescue by Microbiome Labs. There's Gluten Flam from Apex Energetics. There's a million of them. So for me, I've used those to some degree or another, just personally, for years and years. And to be clear, these enzymes, it's not the kind of thing where like you could take some enzymes and then like, yeah, I'm going to go eat a pizza. No. But for me, I can tell you without a shadow of doubt in my mind, taking these enzymes with DPP4 does help curtail a reaction if I get cross-contaminated or if I accidentally have a small amount of gluten. And keep in mind, I'm a celiac, so that's saying something. But I remember I was at an IFM conference in San Diego in 2018. I have like this ingrained in my memory now. Right. I was at this conference and I went to the restaurant. And I must have told that waiter nicely, politely. I told him no less than 37 times. No, it was like 4. That, my friend and I ordered the catch of the day and it came with quinoa. And I confirmed. I was like, okay, it's just quinoa? Like there's no other ingredients? There's no like soy sauce or anything like that? And he said, nope, it's totally gluten-free as is. You're good. He brings back the food. And we were so starved, and we hadn't seen each other in person in a couple years, so we just dove right into eating. Didn't look at my plate enough. So I had a big bite of the quinoa, quote unquote, put it in my mouth, chewed, swallowed, and then I looked at my plate and I realized, oh, that's about 50% quinoa, 50% something I cannot identify, which is a very bad sign. And it looked like a slightly flattened grain of rice, but with a butt crack. If you know what I mean?
Okay.
Like, it looked like wheat. Okay. Is what I'm trying to say. And I was like, oh, damn. Hello? Flagged him over. I took like 6 gluten flam on the spot. I was just nope, not fucking with this. I took a bunch of enzymes, but I flagged him over. Long story short. He went back and forth to the kitchen numerous times. He kept reassuring me, no, it's gluten-free. And then he said, it's quinoa and, what was it? Damn it. I forget if it was kamut or...
So like farro or something?
Farro, thank you. It was farro. It was 50% farro, 50% quinoa. And I had to tell him, I was like, okay. But he said, oh, it's quinoa and farro, but it's gluten-free, don't worry. And I had to confirm that it's farro. Because if it is farro... It is not gluten-free. I can tell you that with 100% certainty. He runs back to the kitchen. He comes back. He probably Googled it on his phone. And he was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. You're right. It is farro. And it is not gluten-free. Long story short. So I ate like half of a spoonful of actual gluten-containing grain. And it was like the last day at this conference, I was flying the following day. So I was like, oh God, I'm going to have diarrhea on an airplane. Oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God. And I didn't have any of my other supplements. I didn't have any of my normal leaky gut healer-uppers. Nothing. Not a damn probiotic in sight. But I had those enzymes. And I decided, you know what? Now's your time to shine, Gluten Flam. And I took like 6 or 8 of them all at once with the meal as soon as I realized what happened. Very minimal reaction. Like, I think I had 1 loose poop, not diarrhea, but like looser than normal.
Right.
And a little bit of bloating, but not like my normal prego belly bloating when I get glutenated. I was impressed. So anyway, this was a long-winded story for this purpose, because that had nothing to do with what I'm about to tell you. I want to say that I think the enzymes do help, is the whole point of that. But anyway, so I have used these DPP4 enzymes for cross-contamination purposes, or when I eat out in restaurants, for years. And I did not realize until a few years ago that DPP4 inhibits GLP-1 secretion. Again, I think gluten flam would probably not be the appropriate one for the hypoglycemic crowd because it also contains quercetin.
Yeah.
But aside from that, like, you could get like Wheat Rescue or another enzyme product that has DPP4, and take, 1 or 2 capsules with your meals and use that as a way to kind of band-aid the symptom for a while until you heal your gut to a point where it's no longer an issue. But it does seem to help. And it's interesting. I did a quick search just for the heck of it. I searched, well, actually, hold on. Sorry, I realized. Okay, when you go on PubMed, you type in DPP4 GLP-1. That's the search. You turn up 1,745
Oh my gosh.
on PubMed. Let's for shits and giggles though, let's just put in title into the search so that we narrow it down a lot more. So it's going to be way less if I do this. Hold on. Okay. Even if you narrow it down to those 2 terms, DPP4 and GLP-1, in just the title of the article, you still get 110 results.
Oh my gosh.
So what they're looking at now, the reason, of course, is they are trying to develop DPP4 inhibitor drugs. And they're saying they could be as good as the GLP-1 agonist drugs. And they think that it might be a treatment for diabetes and hyperglycemia. But then, what's that going to F up? You need,
right.
You need this enzyme probably to digest gluten. So are we going to treat a bunch of diabetic people with DPP4 inhibitors and then make them wickedly gluten intolerant or F up their microbiome? Good Lord, people, just put them on quercetin, for God's sake, or something else. But conventional medicine just misses the boat half the time, and it's in the most comical and frustrating and precious ways, where it's just, I kind of just want to smush their cheeks and go, there, you thought that was a good idea, didn't you?
Right.
Oh, but good Lord. But anyway, you can use these enzymes to your benefit if you are hypoglycemic.
Cool.
And funny enough, I wonder if that was one thing that helped me, because during that time, it was when I was learning about gluten and there weren't as many gluten-free options. And I was taking those enzymes on and off during that time when I was healing my gut, and then eventually my blood sugar got better. So I kind of wonder if that was one minor piece of my story. I don't know.
Yeah. Cool.
Could be. Okay. Well, now this, I'll just throw out there. This will be more to the benefit of the folks tuning in on YouTube. So audio only people, sorry, you're...
Is this my surprise?
It's your surprise. Hold on. I told Amy before we got started that there would be a surprise today. So we've been talking about glucose monitors. So I decided to
look out.
Make a point to wear mine. I don't always wear one, but I still had some sensors and I decided, all right, I'm going to wear it. So for the people on YouTube, sorry, squeaky microphone stand. So if you're on YouTube, you can see it on my arm. You put it on the back of the arm, up high, maybe, a couple inches below the armpit, on the back, on your triceps. It looks like, if you look at, this is the one from the Freestyle Libre, it's about the thickness of a quarter, and it's about the diameter of a quarter as well. And you load it into this contraption. It looks very intimidating. You will think, oh God, it's going to hurt like a son of a gun. There's a needle that's going to go in my arm. This is going to hurt. I kid you not, it does not hurt at all. Don't freak yourself out. But what you do is you load it into the cartridge, you put it here, and then you just go whammo. And it sticks on you, and you get to have this whoozy jig on your arm for about 14 days. And then you can have an app on your phone. Look, there's even a little dude on my app. And then all you do, boom, current blood sugar is 74. Bada bing. But then I'll share another image for you. This was a screenshot that I took. So the very first time I started using this, I'd only used it for a couple days, I think. This was one of my results, and it was very telling. You could see at the time, it looks like I took my blood sugar probably around 8 a.m. or something like that. But look at my overnight reading. Okay, so I was at 95 at that time. Look at that nice dip.
Oh, look at that dip. Look at that dip.
I got down to basically 50.
Yeah.
In the night. It looks like it was right around 5 or 5:30 a.m., which definitely would have been before I woke up.
Mm-hmm.
But that night, I had, so sometimes I'll have a little treat, a little something. Not always, but sometimes I'll have a little something. Sometimes I'll just sneak like a couple chocolate chips or have like, some fruit for dessert or whatever it might be. But that night, for whatever reason, the night prior, I had some dried cherries in the cupboard. I had found this really good recipe years ago on Pinterest for almond flour scones. And it's like chocolate and cherry scone. So you put dried cherries and you put chocolate chips in it, and it's so good. Well, so I keep these dried cherries around, and I have to hide them from my husband because he's a sugar addict. But I will just keep them around in case I want to make that scone recipe. Well, every now and then I'll just take like a little pinch of them and I'll just eat them because they're delicious. And we all know, right? The dried fruit has tons of added sugar. So it's not a healthy thing. But I don't know, for whatever reason, like that evening, I was like, you know what I want? I want like a little pinch of the dried cherries. I kid you not, I only had like half a tablespoon or maybe a tablespoon. Like it was literally a pinch of these dried cherries. And I went about my business. But I had that probably like 9 o'clock at night. And then I probably went to bed at like 10:30 or something. And that was the morning that I had that wicked blood sugar dip at 5 o'clock in the morning. And I went all the way down to 50. And that was a clear enough signal. I was like, okay, lesson learned, not doing that again. So the CGM is really nice because you can get a readout of your blood sugar quickly, painlessly, effortlessly. You just, you go boop, boop, and then you get your reading. And it tracks all throughout the day, all through the night, but sometimes you'll learn weird stuff like that. So honestly, I did that probably a year and a half ago. Right. I have not touched those dried cherries ever since. I'm not going to eat them by themselves anymore. Right. If I put them in the scones or if I put them in something, sure. But it taught me, okay, though, if I eat those by themselves, that's not going to do good things for my blood sugar. So I learned a lesson from it. So it was very valuable. But yeah, that's the kind of stuff that you can start to pick up with the CGM. Like you can notice patterns when you incorporate a new supplement or a new herb, and it can help you understand if that's working. Yeah. And you can pick up on like individual foods where you're like, okay, the dried cherry is totally not working out for me. Or like with my friend who was astonished to find out that actually adding carbohydrates to her diet helped with the hypoglycemia symptoms. It's totally counterintuitive if you follow like the keto low carb kind of stuff out there right now. But she was able to prove it with her CGM. And she was like, it's, because I think you'll back me up on this. We have been taught for so many years, so many generations now, to not trust our bodies and not trust our experience of the world and our symptoms. And we are all so busy and so stressed that we just ignore our symptoms until they are literally screaming in our face. So, to your point earlier with my patient with the quercetin, would she have picked up on it without the CGM? I don't know, maybe. Right. But a lot of people ignore their bodies, or they're so deeply out of touch with their bodies, or enough of the people that we work with are so unwell and they have so many symptoms that they might not know what to attribute a change to. Right. Because it's like that's just one symptom out of like 50 symptoms that they experience in a day. So I like the CGM when we can get it for where it's necessary. If you don't have any blood sugar issues whatsoever, it's not necessary. But it's really nice when you have the ability to track this kind of stuff because it can help inform your decision making regarding nutrition and regarding herbs and supplements moving forward. And you can get some objective data, which helps you understand and pay more attention to the symptomatic changes, since we don't always do a good job of listening to the symptoms when they pop up. Right. So.
And, what the interesting thing, another thing I might be cognizant of, and I think I mentioned it at some point in here, I had a client who was doing CGM, and she had big dips following really tough workouts. Like we were already, I was already a little bit like, these might be a little bit too hard. Yep. And then when she got her CGM, she was like, I feel terrible after my workouts. But like she kept, I think she continued to do them, but then when she got her CGM, it's like, oh, like my blood sugars does not look as good on days that I have my hard workouts. So even monitoring how your body's responding to any sort of physical activity or movement that you're doing, I think can be really helpful too.
Or sleep. Too.
Right, or
like
sleep.
You might notice that your blood sugar goes crazy loco after you got a really shitty night of sleep.
Yep.
I will throw this out there too, and I don't think we've covered this yet, but the one downside I could see, because truly these devices are so useful, they're very reasonably priced now. Like you can get, I think I shared before, when I got my Freestyle Libre, for us in the United States, it's prescription. If you live in Europe, you could probably get this over the counter, actually. They have a model that's over the counter. But here in the US, it's only prescription based. So you would need to ask your provider for one. I found that if when I told my provider, yo, I know I don't have any diagnosis codes that would make sense for this prescription, so I want you to order it and I will just pay out of pocket. We're not even dealing with insurance. I found that made it much easier. But I think the reader, because you do need to get like a reader device, which is stupid because you can use your cell phone. So you shouldn't have to purchase the reader device, but they make you do it anyway. It's dumb. I just use my phone. But, the reader, I think, cash out of pocket, no insurance, was like $85. And then the sensors that last for 2 weeks a piece, I think the first time I got them, I used a GoodRx coupon, and I think I got 2 of them for $60.
Right.
I think they're normally $60 a piece. So, like, if you're only using this for a couple of months, potentially, to kind of, like, optimize stuff and figure out what's going on, it's very reasonably priced.
Right.
The only thing that I would throw out there is if you have any sort of history with disordered eating, or if you tend to get obsessive about stuff, just be a little cautious, because data is wonderful, but there's a fine line between being curious and investigating something and becoming obsessed with it. Right. And like, if you think that you would be the person who's checking their blood sugar literally every 5 minutes all day long,
right,
and like over analyzing the data and driving yourself crazy, then you might not want to get one of these. But if you don't have those sorts of tendencies, or if you think that you could kind of rein them in for a couple weeks just to get the benefit out of using the gadget, and then discontinue using it after you got your data collection, I think that'd be fine.
Good point. I think that's a great point to throw in there.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
do we have anything else?
Not that I can think of.
No, I can't think of anything either.
I think I've tapped out the brain. I'm still back on the Mountain Dew, though.
Okay. We've come full circle.
Oh, moral of the story, people, do not drink Mountain Dew. Can we please, like... Can we riot? Yeah, can we riot and like put it out of business or something? I don't know, because that's just absolutely atrocious.
Agreed.
I feel like we need to share something happy though. We need to talk about something better than this.
Oh wait, I have a good one.
Okay, is it a picture of Chip? What? I do. For those of you not on YouTube,
and there's a backside.
Oh. Even more precious. So Amy has a pillow that I can only describe to you as magnificent. It, on the one side, is a picture of she, her husband, and Chipperino. And on the back side, it's just a picture of her adorable dog, Chip. And I am so in favor of this right now.
This is like right when we got him. He used to be such a little chunk. Look at his body.
He looks kind of over it too. I'm just going to say, like, he's kind of like, I'll strike a pose because mom wants me to, but also like, can I have a treat?
He's kind of like, I don't know if I like my new home.
Yeah.
That's what he's thinking there.
These people are weird.
Yep.
I mean, in fairness, if he did say these people are weird, that was precisely true.
Tummy. Look at his little tummy.
Oh,
he has little tummy rolls. Baby. Yep.
Oh,
well, that's Chip.
I need to shop for a beagle soon. I
You
need to check
do.
out the Beetle Rescue site. You're giving me the itch again.
Well, and I'm very excited. So there's a little girl named Lane in our neighborhood, and Chip's like by far her favorite dog. And I'm not really sure why, because they're like Chip's great. But like with kids, like he loves Lane and they do get along, but like sometimes he's just a little jumpy.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not like the type of like, oh, like a big golden retriever that'll just kind of sit there and let like a kid pet it.
Yeah.
Like Chip's like, I want to play. Like he bites up all her toys, but like half the time she thinks it's hilarious. Like he'll grab the Barbie leg and like run with the Barbie, and her grandma's like, oh, Chip's taking your Barbie on a ride, and she like thinks it's the funniest thing ever. This like little 3-year-old girl.
Side note, Jess would be so pissed.
Okay, yeah. Okay,
She
Jess
would not be
pissed.
Entertained at all.
I think most
scream like a banshee.
I think most little girls would be pissed. I think Lane's a little bit of a different sort, but Lane thinks it's so funny, and she just is like, she'll like sing when he's like being crazy, and then she thinks it's funny because I can never catch him when we have to leave, because we'll go to their backyard. It's like fenced in. Yeah. And we have to leave, and he'll like be running away, and they'll sing a song like, oh no, he won't go. Like her and the grandma will sing a song over and over. But I have for her, this is a cute story. So I bought her like a little Chip stuffed animal. It's like a Boston Terrier stuffed animal for her birthday. So I'm probably going to give it to her this weekend because her birthday's November 4th, and I think they're celebrating it this weekend. So I'm like, I might drop it off. But she like loves Chip. She'll tell her grandma she misses him all the time. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, well, when you miss him, you can just hug this little stuffed animal and think of Chip.
That's so cute.
So that was a happier story.
Very well. Yes. And that is funny that she thinks it's amusing because, yeah, Jess would lose her shit.
Yeah.
So bad. Oh, man.
It's bad when we don't go over, like if there's a big gap when we haven't gone over to her backyard, because he loses his mind. Chip will lose his mind. Like he gets so overstimulated. Because there were days, like especially in the summer, where we'd go over there like 2 or 3 times a week. And I just let him run around for like a half an hour in their backyard. But like, you know, if I'm busier with work stuff and things like that, I don't necessarily have the time to like go over there for a half an hour during the day. But so if it had been like 3 or 4 weeks or something, he would like lose his mind, be like, oh my God, I'm so excited to be back. And he would just like chew up everything. I'm like, So it was kind of a nightmare scenario, but it is
no
cute.
Nightmares involve Chip. That is false. That's a lie. And I have one more random thing to throw out there. So you
thought of something. Is this blood sugar related?
Not at all. No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
If you're looking for academic stuff, you can just leave now, people. So one more thing. I was going to make it kind of like a test for our viewers to see, to test them out. I decided not to do it. I was going to see if the viewers noticed anything different about my video on YouTube, but I'm impatient and I just want to reveal what it is now. So I'll do a quiz for you instead. Do you notice anything different about my background, Amy?
The tie-dye shirt.
Yes, well, it's not a shirt.
A towel. Is it a towel?
Well, it's just a piece of fabric.
Okay. I noticed that earlier. I noticed that earlier today.
Yeah. So I don't know if I ever articulated this. So I have the weird thing behind me because I cover up my camera, and that way I have to leave my YouTube equipment out at all times because if I put it away and make my office look nice, I lose all motivation to record YouTube videos.
Right.
So I have to like step around all of the umbrella lights and the giant camera stand, and I have to like maneuver around it because that actually is less work for me. So I have my camera here, but I don't want it to get dusty. So I always have it covered up with a cloth of some sort, but I just like grabbed whatever crappy scrap fabric I had at home before and I just like covered it up. But recently, Jess has been into tie-dye. So we have done 2 tie-dye sessions at Grandma's house, and not gonna brag, we're getting pretty good at it.
Dang.
And this recent time, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go to Joann Fabrics. I'm gonna get a piece of fabric, and I'm going to tie-dye a beautiful piece of fabric to cover up my camera with. And that way, it'll be a more beautiful version instead of that crappy black and white pattern that I had before.
Excellent. I love it.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that is officially between the chip stories, the pillows, the tie-dye, I think we've officially ended on a high note. Guys, as always, thank you so much for tuning in for the IBS Freedom Podcast. If you love this podcast, we would appreciate it if you shared it with God in the world, anybody who you think would benefit from it. Just help us get the word out, help us cure the world of IBS and gut dysbiosis and gut problems. And like I said, keep an eye out on Instagram. Make sure you follow both of us. I am at Triangle Guts. Amy is Amy_Hollenkamp_RD. And we're going to be doing some Instagram live videos on Wednesdays to answer your questions, either sent in live during the Q&A or answering questions from our YouTube videos and our email. So keep your eyes peeled and we will be answering your questions soon. Until then, we will see you in the next episode of the IBS Freedom Podcast. Toodaloo.